Hey, Luke here with CatsandCarp.com, and me and my boy Tom here are going to talk to you about catching bait with cast nets. Let me talk to you a little bit about picking the right cast net. Now, there's a couple things to factor in, like size, okay? So they measure our cast nets in feet. There'll be a 5-foot net, an 8-foot net, a 10-foot net. This is the radius of the net when you spread it out in a big circle, okay? So generally speaking, if you're starting out, you want a net that's within about a foot or so of your height, maybe even a little bit less. The bigger the net, the more unwieldy it is and the harder it is to manage, okay? So start off, go a little bit smaller. I'm about 6'4", so a 6-foot net was a really good way for me to start out when I was first learning how to throw a cast net. Now I use a 10-foot net. It's right on the high end of what's wieldy, what I can manage. And it gets a little cumbersome. You can go up to like 20-foot nets, 40-foot nets, but those require completely different throwing techniques, and they're hard to use, especially in fresh water. So unless you're out as a guide or something like that, or really into cast nets, 10-foot is about the biggest you're going to want to mess around with, and that's only if you're a tall person and got a pretty good throwing arm. So the radius of the net's important. The other thing is the mesh size, okay? Now what you do is the bigger the mesh, the faster the net will sink. So the better it is for getting down there quickly and grabbing the fish, okay? But the bigger the mesh size, obviously, the bigger the fish need to be. If, you know, with my 1-inch mesh, I can't catch 1-inch long fish, okay? So the other thing too is with bigger mesh size, the fish tend to get their gills and fins tangled up in the mesh. So when you're trying to get your fish out, it's more of a hassle and more of the fish get mangled and wounded. And if you're trying to use live bait, that's a problem. If you use smaller mesh, the net tends to envelop the fish rather than entangle the fish. And so when you pull the net out, you can just dump all the fish out, and it works out really nice. So you're kind of playing this give and take. You want a mesh that's going to sink fast, but you want a mesh that's going to be the right size for the bait you're catching. The other thing you're looking at is how many pounds the net is, and they do it by pounds per foot. So they say if it's 1 pound per foot and it's a 5-foot net, that's a 5-pound net. The total net, the net weighs 5 pounds. The more weight you have, the harder it is to throw the net. Okay, so I have a 10-foot net at 1.5 pounds per foot. That's a 15 pounds that you're chucking. You know, not everybody's into doing that. So you got to kind of balance weight versus how fast it lets the net sink. Obviously, the more lead in there, the faster the net will sink, and that's a good thing. You want that net to sink quickly, get the fish before they scatter when they hear the net throw. Okay, so you're looking at the mesh size, the radius of the net, and the pounds per foot. Those are all factors when buying a net. Now, if you're in freshwater, catfishing like I'm doing, another thing to think about is where you're throwing the net. If you're throwing the net from a boat, you can get a really big net because you're throwing the net in open water and it's not going to snag in and stuff. If you're throwing the net from shore, it's hard to find a place where a 10-foot radius net can not snag up. So a smaller net becomes better because it gets tangled and snags a lot less. Okay, so bigger isn't always better. You know, think about what you're doing. And snags is the #1 problem for freshwater cast net guys. I have a hard time getting a cast net to last more than a year because I end up getting it so snagged and ripped up that it's just garbage by the end of a year. Of course, I use my net an awful lot. I use it a couple times a week. So snags is a big deal. And so if you're fishing from the shore, you got to kind of look at, well, my location, you know, what kind of net will fit in here. So like right here, we have a boat launch, and a 10-foot net will barely work here. It's, you know, it'll fit just about perfectly, but that's because there's absolutely no snags out there. You know, it's a boat launch. So if I go off to the sides, left or right of the boat launch, I'm lucky if I can get a 6-foot net to fit. So it's an issue. Now, if you want to know how to throw a cast net, I have a great video on how to do it. It's a really simple technique, doesn't involve putting the lead in your mouth. It's great for beginners. There's more consistent and precise techniques out there, but they're more complicated. So if you're just a casual recreational user, you're not a guide or something, it's a great technique, and it's the one I use all the time. So if you want to check out how to throw a cast net, check out this video, and that'll give you all the detailed explanation of how to throw a cast net. And this technique works on all the different sizes up to about 10 feet.
If you're learning to throw a cast net, it's really easy to get fixated on trying to throw a perfect circle every time. But it's much, much more important to throw your cast net in the right location than it is to throw it perfectly. What you want to do is throw it consistently well. Okay? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a nice circle every time. It just has to open up a bit, frankly. And if you get it in the right spot, you're going to catch fish. And if you don't put it in the right spot, it doesn't matter how perfectly you threw it, you're not going to catch anything. So being able to find the shad and throw your cast net right on top of them is much more important than worrying about having the perfect technique. What you really want to do is just have it so you can consistently get the net to open 50% or more. And then once you're to that spot, then it's all about finding the right location. Now, if you don't have a boat, you can do it from the shore, but snags are a problem. So boat ramps and docks and bridges are really popular places to throw a cast net. Early morning and at night are the best times because that's when the shad come in shallow. If you have a boat, you can go and chase the shad around, and you can go find out where they are at in the middle of the day, and you can pretty much get them at any time. The best way to find them is to see them jumping. They'll either come flying out of the water when you run over them, or you'll see little ripples. But if you can't see them, or if it's in the wintertime when they're down deep, you have to use a fish finder. And this side imaging sonar is really good for it. So you can see some examples here of what a school of shad look like on the fish finder. They come off of these blobs. You know, there's a big blob of fish right here. You can see the white marks are the fish, and then there's the shadow. That's what they look on the side imaging, and then that's what it looks like on the down imaging. And what you want to do is you want to set your down imaging beam as narrow as possible so that when you drive over a big school of shad like this, you know exactly when and at what point you drove over them. And as soon as you see that on the sonar, you go in a tight circle, as tight as you can, and you mark with your eyes where you saw that shad. Where was the boat when you first saw that on the sonar, and you circle back to that same spot with your net ready to go in your hand, and you got to cast right on top of that same spot. And this takes some practice, because once again, it's much more important to throw the net in the right place than it is to have it open up perfectly. But if you hit it, it's awesome. And you can see here I got a reasonably well open net, put it on the right spot, got over 20 shad, one hit. That's how it should go. And then you just put them all in a live well if you're going to do live bait, or throw them on ice if you're going to chop them up. But that's how it is. And when it works well, it's awesome. So at any rate, I hope this video was helpful in getting you on the right track for picking out the right cast net for your situation and figuring out a little bit more about how to use it right. Cast nets are fabulous. If your local laws allow it, I highly recommend trying out. If nothing else, it's really fun, and it's a great way to catch a lot of bait. So if you like this video, check out some other great videos from catsandcarp.com, and don't forget to click subscribe to get new videos every week. Thanks for watching.